Time to smash it up for a 6-0 edition of the Sunday Smash, presented by State Farm agent and longtime Noles and Warchant supporter Russ Forhis. Alongside Ira Schoffel, my name is Tom Lang, and we are breaking down a top 4 team in the country, Ira, that is 6-0 at the halfway point. How are you this fine day in Tallahassee, Ira? The weather's been beautiful today.
It couldn't be nicer, man. We did a little bit of decorating out in the yard. We got a late start on the Halloween decorations this year, so it was a nice day to go do it.
What is your favorite piece of Halloween decorations?
We've got a pretty cool like spider web thing with spiders in it. But what I want to do, and my family's kind of prevented me from doing, is we have a second floor balcony.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've always wanted to do is like when trick or treaters come to the door, throw like a fake body over the railing down, and nobody will let me do it. They're thinking about compromising to doing it with a skeleton because that won't look quite as
real. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I would do it to like 5-year-olds, but I think
right. Teenagers.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Just a body comes flying over the balcony. But anyway, so that's where we're at right now.
My dad used to walk around as a bloody bum in Brooklyn back in the day, and walk around and scare kids like, you're a man after my father's heart. Just so the orange police don't get me, this is a creamsicle. I'm rocking the creamsicle today for the Bucks, who are looking. That offense looks creamsicle worthy today in Tampa, as the Bucks have a grand total of 6 points in the fourth quarter. But
do the players like? I turned it on for a little bit and I was watching. Do the players like it, or you think the players are like, what are we doing?
I think it is far enough in the past that those guys have no idea that it's associated with being a loser. That I think they're all right with it, because it's that kind of styles come back around. The powder blues has been really cool for a long time. Like all those little pastel-y 70s things, people love these days. But I don't know if they'll love it after this one, Ira, because I don't know how, maybe another 3 quarters and we'll score a touchdown. But Director Ben's Lions are taking the cake. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about Florida State being 6-0 and an easy win over another team that wears orange in Syracuse. Ira, your thoughts from the stadium and the postgame, just in general, now that you've had time to reflect the last 24 plus hours. What do you make of what you saw yesterday and all that you took in?
It's kind of a weird game because, Syracuse was just not competitive. Even I thought defensively, now they did, I thought there were a few times in the game where it looked like Florida State, especially early on, a few times, because Syracuse, the way their alignment is so not typical. Sometimes it looks like it's an obvious decision to run the ball, but then the box gets loaded pretty quickly. They'll bring in guys from all over. So I think it was a little bit tricky sometimes. But from a personnel standpoint, Florida State really could name their score. And that's why Mike Norvell decided to go for it on the 4th and 4, whatever it was, down in the red zone. I think he didn't respect Syracuse, and he figured he could do whatever he wanted. And so when you have that mindset and you realize the coaching staff has that mindset, it's kind of hard to take the game super seriously because it's such a mismatch. And if you watch Dino Babers' press conference, our guy Matt Lacerra went and videotaped that, and he texted me afterwards. He's like, man, Dino, he sounded a little downtrodden. And, I think it's a combination of their seasons not going the way they expected, plus, they just were not competitive in this game. So that's the only thing that bothers me. I thought Florida State played well. I think it was a pretty complete game. I think the defense was impressive. And the big plays on offense and special teams were impressive. But I just have a hard time taking too much away from it because Syracuse, really more than any team they played, just wasn't competitive.
Yeah, agreed. I think you're correct. I think there's 2 things that play into it. It's the opponent when you go for it on 4th and goal from the 4, and I think frustration that they didn't execute plays that he thought were there on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down. But you're right. I mean, another sign of disrespect, if you will, is first drive of the second half, and all of your backup front 4 is out there. I mean, it's Gilbert Edmond, Byron Turner, Malcolm Ray, Dennis Briggs. I mean, the starters had a half an hour rest. Ira, the halftime in college takes forever, and that's what you start with. And then, oddly enough, that drive was the weirdest one of the game because it's 3rd and 9, and Dino calls a draw or just a run up the middle to give up and punt. It's like, wow, okay. The score is 17-3 at that point, I guess. So to your point, it's tough to have a lot of giant takeaways, but this defense now, Ira, in the last 8 quarters, I know Corey's got a piece up on warchant.com right now about 10 quarters of dominance. But that defense has given up 13 points the last 2 weeks.
Right.
And if you extend it out, it's not much more. If you talk about the second half of the Clemson game, that's for real, I think, right? I mean, not that you would say that Syracuse specifically has a takeaway from it, but that's a trend that is now worth remarking on.
Yeah, I think so. And Syracuse is not devoid of talent. I mean, they have a couple of skill players, and Babers talked about the fact that it was so frustrating for them because even if they thought they had a receiver breaking free where they maybe had an opportunity in the passing game, the pass would get swatted down at the line of scrimmage, or the pressure would come and they just couldn't hold up to protect for Garrett Schrader. So and then when they did make plays, I thought Florida State did a good job of just not letting a drive sustain. I thought letting them sustain drives. I thought, and again, you think about the Boston College game, or you think about maybe in times of the Virginia Tech game, or just different times of the season where the defense seemed to maybe just lose focus or lose. We kept asking about the killer instinct, and if you don't have that, it shows up against even bad offenses. And I think it's definitely a good sign that they never really let Syracuse maintain the ball for a long time or finish off any of those drives.
This is one of those things I love to ask you because I'm never in that room, the press conference room, and it has a feel to it that even on Warchant TV, we have all the videos. You can watch all the post-game press conferences in addition to the wrap with Ira and Corey. But the feel of the room is something that you can't see, through the screen on YouTube. So how did that feel to you? What did Mike Norvell's tenor say to you about what they thought about the performance yesterday, and then the players as well, Ira?
Two things I would say. Two things that really stood out to me was, one is I think they were very happy. I think which tells me they took the game very seriously, like that they were just watching, like Keon Coleman looking at the stat sheet and like reading out Jordan Travis's numbers passing. Like he was happy for Jordan. He thought that Jordan played well, and he thought the numbers represented that, even though the completion percentage wasn't great. But you complete 23 passes for almost 300 yards. And Mike Norvell seemed very happy. I mean, he was, I think, very happy that they took the game seriously. They prepared well during the week, and especially defensively, the way they kind of took care of business. It just wasn't sloppy. They didn't play down to the competition, which is something you always kind of worry about. And then otherwise, my other big takeaway was, if you go back and watch the interview with Josh Farmer and or Lawrence Toafili or those guys, there's a Shaheem Brown, like there was a real, I thought, humility that came through in terms of not feeling like not bragging, not boasting about beating a team 41-3. Very much like this was a business situation. They treated it like business. They did what they were supposed to do. I thought one of the things Josh Farmer said was really interesting. He said the thing they talked about as a defensive line before the game is, don't do anything. Don't try to do anything special. Just do your job and play hard and fight. And if you do that, everything else will take care of itself. And I thought that was kind of indicative of the way they played.
Yeah, they were all about it all day. It's a pleasure to watch. It's not something we've seen a ton of. Although last year, the defense performed well in situations like this, right. Blew out 6 opponents. But when an offense rolls out there and you expect that the ball's going to be punted back to you, or the turnover is going to get generated, it's a luxury that Florida State hasn't had consistently for a long time. And so there'll be another test this upcoming week against Duke. The news and notes there is the 7:30 kick. It was going to be prime time, but we didn't know if it was going to be 7:30 or 8 p.m. That kickoff is now 7:30. And interestingly enough, Las Vegas is telling you, Ira, that they don't believe that the starting quarterback for Duke is going to play. That line opened at 15.5 today.
Yeah, and I thought there was some interesting gamesmanship by Mike Elko at their game the other night. He brought him out. They brought Riley Leonard out to pregame. They had him throwing passes after the game. One of the reporters asked Elko if Riley Leonard was close to a game time decision, and he said, "Oh yeah, he was out there in pregame. It was really close." But if you watch the way he was throwing those passes, we'll see. Yeah. They can do some things to help ankles out, but he was not putting a lot of pressure on the ankle. He was standing very upright. He was not like pushing off at all. So, we'll see. We'll see how he is this week. But I agree with you. I think that Vegas doesn't think he's going to play.
Yeah, if he plays, that number's not 15.5, right. If they think he's going to go. So that indicates to me that whatever information they get is potentially good for Florida State. As Riley Leonard, I think on game day, they said something to the effect of they're really hoping he's full speed for Louisville. in a couple of weeks too. So those are the context clues. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, like, coaches can kind of, I don't know, gamesmanship their way through circles, and you never really know for sure. But it feels to me that if you felt like Riley Leonard was gonna play, if you were confident Riley Leonard was gonna play, I think you would let Florida State know that as late as possible.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't want to build this pass game up as, yeah, he's gonna play. There's a chance he's gonna play. Have him go out there and throw pregame warmups. If you thought there was a good chance he was going to play this way, I think you'd rather keep him under wraps so that FSU thinks, oh, maybe he's not going to play.
We will have a guest tonight on Sunday Smash. He'll be joining us in just a little over half an hour. It's Warchant football analyst Dominic Robinson. D-Rob is joining the program at about 7:45. He's going to close out the show with us. And after giving his initial thoughts on what he's seen so far, Dominic's first video of the year was out this week on the channel. It was a really good look at Florida State's running game. Always insightful stuff. If you have questions about scheme and X's and O's, he's going to answer that to close the show today. So in the chat right now, there's nearly 500 of you watching. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Warchant TV. But if you have scheme questions, we'll probably get to 2 or 3 of them. So make them good questions, and we'll see what D-Rob has to say about your specific queries on Florida State's offense or defense. This is somebody who played both sides of the ball, guys and gals, and also D-Rob still coaches in the high school game on Friday nights. So very well-versed is Dominic Robinson. We can't wait to be joined by him in just a half an hour. What this also means, though, is that your questions for us, we'll start that process a little bit earlier. I'd say maybe in about 10 minutes or so or less. This is the Sunday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Forhis. He covers, insurance-wise, 3 states that are in the Noles footprint. Yes, Florida, of course, and you see the numbers there for his 2 offices, the brick-and-mortar offices. But russforhis.com is his website, and also he covers everybody, Ira, in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. And he's been a longtime supporter of what we do at Warchant as well.
When you say that, it makes me feel like a slacker because we just cover Florida State. We're just focused here on Tallahassee, but Russ, he can take care of you if you're across the Southeast. But obviously, he has offices in the Jacksonville area, so does most of his business, I think, there. But yeah, man, he can help Noles and even non-Noles outside of the Jacksonville area across Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Really good guy, just a guy that, just a good, solid businessman, supporter of Florida State athletics, a friend of the program. He consumes Warchant content. He's been a longtime subscriber, friend of Gene Williams, and we're just thrilled that he's part of the show.
Well, it's one of those things, too. If you want to talk to him to explore options or you have questions, he will do that. You don't have to sign up and then you get to talk to Russ. This is it's a conversation that you can have. So we appreciate his support. Good.
Yeah, and you can go to the website, russforhis.com, and you can actually request a quote and start the process that way. So it's just not super high pressure, that type of thing.
That's the way Russ does it, and that's the way we do it. It's just no pressure night here on Sunday Smash. Florida State's 6-0 at the halfway poll. This is exactly what you want, where you want it to be. Everybody in the preseason, we focus on September and those 2 critical games against LSU and against Clemson. Florida State gets through those. And Ira, there were a lot of question marks, but getting home finally to play home games 2 and 3 on the slate feels like momentum is picking back up. So in that spirit, and we just had a Friday the 13th. So in the weirdness spirit, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions at the halfway mark. What's the weirdest thing that you've seen about Florida State so far this season, maybe that you didn't expect, but you're now saying, all right, I guess that's just kind of who they are? What stood out to you that in the surprise department for FSU halfway through the year?
Probably that probably the running game, that it has taken a while to get going. And you mentioned the piece that D-Rob did last week. I thought the video, if you want to go back and watch it, it's on our YouTube channel, and it's it's a good look at the running game and how they executed things against Virginia Tech and why some things didn't work against Clemson. And I think I just assumed that even though the personnel changed a little bit on the offensive line, that they would kind of pick up where they were. And it's taken them a little while. Looking back, I think we probably underestimated what it meant to lose Maurice Smith, what it meant to lose Robert Scott 4 weeks at a time, and now they're both back in the lineup. Every week Darius Washington's playing a different position. You have and then they're also trying to work in all those guys. Like, I think I don't think they feel like Dimitri Emmanuel is a huge upgrade over Keandre Jones or vice versa. So they're playing them both. And it's an interesting experiment that they've had over the first 5-6 weeks of the season. but I think that all is part of why the running game hasn't really kind of taken off. I guess I just always have taken that for granted with Alex Atkins, Mike Norvell, and Jordan Travis at quarterback, that the running game is going to be super effective, and it hasn't quite been the case.
So a side question for you. Yesterday, Bless Harris was a game time decision. Did you happen to see him take warm-ups? I know that was the plan, and then I'm assuming he was in street clothes on the sideline after that, since he didn't take a snap.
No, I mean he was dressed. I didn't
Oh,
go. I didn't go back to check. I mean, he was definitely dressed out and going through pregame warmups.
Yep.
I can't remember if he participated, or excuse me, was on the sideline still in uniform. I think he was. But even in pregame warmups, like Darius was taking the first team reps at left tackle. Rob Scott and Bless were behind him, and I think it was probably a situation where if they don't need to play him, give him another week to get healthy. So yeah, going into next week, if now Darius Washington was one guy. He came back in straight clothes at some point during the second half, and it looked like he had a brace on his left knee, so it didn't look like it was cumbersome. Like it wasn't like he couldn't walk, but he did leave the game. But if you have Robert Scott, Bless Harris, and Jeremiah Byers, you feel pretty good at tackle, and you certainly have the interior alignment that you need. You'd like to have Darius as that swing guy. But we don't know how he's going to be this week yet.
That's interesting. I did not know that. And now that makes Maury Smith's health all the more critical moving forward because Darius is your backup center there. Okay. So another big picture question for you at the halfway point. What's the best thing about where Florida State is 6-0 beyond the record, of course, but what's the biggest thing that you take away and you say, good job, this has been successful?
Man, I would say I'm going to switch to the defensive side just because, not to do two offensive things. I think that the defense is. I think the secondaries found themselves. I thought early in the year, I was surprised by some of the miscommunications. Just guys, some of the big plays that were given up in the passing game that was so unlike this defense. Again, we debated a lot last year about whether or not that was a good defense or not, or was it just good because they played bad offenses the whole second half of the year. I always felt like there's something to be said for a defense that doesn't give up a ton of big plays, and they didn't give up a ton of big plays. Well, early this year they were, but I really think that they've settled down now. I think the back end is stabilized now. You got Akeem Dent back in the starting lineup. You got I think Cypress and Renardo Green have been solid, and then Shaheem I think is coming on. It was nice to see Shaheem get a little bit more active yesterday. So I think that has been a real positive that the back end is kind of solidified after kind of a rocky start.
It's a big game for Shaheem. Led the team in tackles with 7. He had 6 solo tackles, a sack and a half, and a pass breakup. That's a big day at the office there for Shaheem. And I noticed, Ira, a couple of plays yesterday, just because we've seen some issues in communication. I think Mike Norvell called them missed opportunities in communication or something along those lines after the BC game. But you're watching Akeem Dent play traffic cop back there, and it just looks so much simpler. Like he says one or two things and guys go where they're supposed to go. There is no debate. There's something to be said for having a veteran there that people understand that, all right, whatever he says goes, and I'm going to follow his word.
Yeah, and even it's a good point. Even on the sideline, just watching him talk to Conrad Hussey when Hussey had been in the game, and they come back. Yeah. They come back to the sideline, and Akeem's talking to Conrad on the sideline like a coach. He's explaining something very calmly, and I think he's got a good demeanor for that too. And again, this is a guy that has been here now, I don't know, 5-6 years. He's been here for a long time. I think he might have committed. He might have committed when Jimbo was here, and then stuck it through and signed with Willie. So yeah, man, it's you got a real veteran presence there. It's good to have him back.
To me, I'd say that the best thing so far is the interior of that defensive line, and the answers are a little bit different than you would have expected preseason. Like Fabian Lovett's playing, but it's not a lion's share of reps that Fabian Lovett is logging week to week. They have a good rotation going. Dennis Briggs has been quite solid, I'd say, since the beginning of the year. But then how about Malcolm Ray? We don't talk about him ever. He's had a couple of good weeks in a row, making plays, batting passes down, stuffing runs. Malcolm Ray has gone from like the 6th or 7th guy and out of the discussion to a valuable piece of the rotation.
Yeah, that's another good point. And I think the thing about that defensive tackle rotation that's so cool and a really positive thing is that, to your point, like Fabian Lovett is going to finally go pro after this year. He's a guy that's, I think people around FSU wondered if he was going to go to the NFL 2 years ago. Then he came back for last year, got injured, and decided to come back for this year. And now he's definitely going to be going now. And you might think he would be motivated by stats. And I think what they've convinced him and these other defensive linemen, your point earlier about starting the second half with a backup defensive line, is they want those guys to show what they can do against Miami, against Florida, in a bowl game, and maybe the ACC championship game. And I think the whole mindset is we want you as fresh as possible for those last 4 or 5 games. And those guys have bought in because they're not playing nearly as much as you would expect.
Yeah, agreed. Not in the preseason, at least, but that's just kind of who they are now. And for better or worse, I think that rotation, even against big-time opponents, that's just going to be a part of what they do. It seems that they're on a schedule, too, for the most part. You can tell
Right.
it's like a wholesale change, and that's just going to be the way it is. I know that Alex Atkins talks about that with the offensive line. Nobody's surprised when they come to the sidelines and they stay there, or when Keandre Jones comes off the sidelines for a drive. It's all communicated ahead of time so that nobody's feelings get hurt in the process. Now for the negative side of it. So through 6 games, Florida State's undefeated. Their top 4, all of their goals. I mean, if you were a playoff or bust guy like me, they're on target for that. If you had to circle one thing and say, okay, if they're going to get and upset, because they should be a favorite the rest of the way in the regular season, if they're going to get upset, it is because of what, do you think?
I wonder how the offensive line is going to play against, a really good defensive front. Now, Clemson, I think, is a great defensive front, and Florida State handled that about as well as they could. I mean, that was a big reason why, you just didn't see a ton of offense in that game. The running game got nothing, like 22 total yards. Jordan also wasn't, totally healthy probably in that game either. So now Jordan's a big equalizer. You get into games later, but I think that's one, I look at, if Miami's motivated, their defensive line can be pretty good. If you get to, if you get in the playoff, that kind of situation. So that offensive line to me is like, it's solid, but I don't know if it's as good as maybe we hoped it would be.
Yeah.
And I wonder, how they'll hold up against, if they get in that, if they start playing the heavyweights.
That's a good point. Pass pro has been better than the run blocking so far, but we saw in camp that pass protection actually looked to be the bigger issue. So if they face a good front, how does that look? And can you keep Jordan upright? Gordon just jumped into the chat. Thank you very much for the contribution, Gordon, and kind words, it would appear. The content is head and shoulders above all others at Warchant. Check out other sites. Thank you. Should we be pulling for an undefeated North Carolina team to enhance our playoff chances if there is a 5 undefeated conference champion scenario? Thank you, Gordon. We really appreciate that for the kind words. That's a good question. So for style points purposes, for stock purposes, what do you think, Ira? You think it's better off that North Carolina cruises from here on out?
Yeah, probably. Because I don't know if it matters if they have a loss or a win in terms of, it's not like they're going to cash in their chips if they lost a game at some point. So it's not like where, you're, if they do lose a game where they're going to like free fall and they're not going to be in the conversation. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if Louisville still loses another game. Now, Clemson has 2 losses, so we'll have to see how that plays out. Duke's got a loss. No, Duke does not have a conference loss yet. So yeah, I mean, I could see it. When you think back to, I go back to the year Florida State, 2012, when they played Northern Illinois in the bowl game. Mm-hmm. Like going into 2012, that was supposed to be a really hard schedule. And for whatever reason, everybody stunk. Like all the teams that we thought in 2012, Florida State was going to maybe get style points against, all those teams just had bad seasons. It wasn't Florida State's fault. And then they end up playing Northern Illinois in the bowl game, which also was not their fault. And so that season, they never could get a marquee win. And the only reason I bring that up is because that's what led to a lot of people discounting that team and the fact that, how good were they really? And I think, that you could see that happening, but it seems like people are so still giving the LSU win so much respect. And you won at Clemson that I think you probably don't need it. But it probably doesn't hurt either.
Over 650 of you watching Sunday Smash right now. Welcome in to Warchant TV. Hit that like button underneath. It helps us find more FSU fans who are looking for good content.
Who is there a team in the conference you think they don't need to be playing in the conference championship?
No, I'm impressed enough with the defense. I think they're going to be in they can handle whoever. Now, North Carolina is the largest threat. I mean, Drake May is going to go top 5 for a reason. And Ira, when I was researching the Syracuse game last week, and their previous games against Clemson and North Carolina, May dropped, I'd say, at maybe 10 throws on against really good coverages that broke the spirit of what Syracuse was doing. And that's anytime you go against a quarterback like that, you got to hold your breath that it could be 3rd and forever, and he might just still find, Tez Walker. And then you got yourself a real problem where you thought you were getting off the field or over midfield. And it's just like, well, that's that guy. So if you can avoid him, I'd be okay with it. I don't care if it's a 2-loss team that you're facing that has no ranking in the ACC championship. I think if Florida State's 12-0, they're going. There's no doomsday scenario where they could be 13-0 and not in the playoff.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer. I worry a little bit if the resume takes, I was especially worried about the resume a couple weeks ago when LSU looked like they might be free falling, but they had a really impressive game yesterday. And so I think the fact that what they held Jaden Daniels to, I think is going to help, because I think that's something that we didn't know at the time, but man, that guy's having an incredible season. And Florida State kind of kept him in check, certainly in the second half.
It's looking more and more impressive. That Auburn defense is good that they, produced against consistently last night. The Alabama game is going to be a bit of a tell too, about what LSU offensively can do against Alabama. That could influence Florida State's stock one way or the other. And then Clemson plays a lot of important games too. I know we did the Sunday Smash after the Clemson win, Ira, and you were very impressed with what you saw, with your own eyes live up there at Death Valley. But Clemson still plays Miami next week. Good luck, Miami, with that one. They play Notre Dame, does Clemson. They play North Carolina. So if they win those games, then again, I think Florida State could their stock could rise just because the other teams, they go on and they play important games and they win them. And that wouldn't be crazy to suspect that Clemson could win at least 2 out of 3 of those marquee matchups, right?
Yeah, I think they'll beat Miami. I think, I think there's a good chance they'll beat Notre Dame. Will be probably a toss. It'll be a big defensive slugfest. And
North Carolina. North Carolina in the 11th game of the season. Very strange to have a conference game like that with that kind of stakes on the line. That's on November the 18th or roughly. That's when that game will take place.
Yeah. It's obviously Tez Walker looks impressive. So we'll see how that develops.
A difference. We will take your questions in just a moment. But now a 15-second message from our friend Russ Fortis.
Contact Russ Voris for an auto quote today.
Okay, before we get to your questions in the chat, I've got one for Ira, and it's teasing this week's edition of Coach Speak. Ira, did you do it? Did you watch Jimbo's presser last night or anybody else's?
I did watch Jimbo's presser, and it, they're struggling. He looks pretty deflated. But the best press conference I've seen so far was probably our guy at South Carolina, Shane Beamer.
Mm-hmm.
My guy, he not only throws his players under the bus, he puts it in reverse. He comes back over him again. Shane Beamer said they had perfect calls in several situations, and the players just screwed him up. And it's like, dude, you can't say that. Oh my! It's his press conference. The first 4 or 5, he's got a list of all the times basically my players screwed me. It's a oof. I mean, that it'll be interesting to see how his team responds to that press conference.
Shades of execution Monday after.
Dude, it's exactly like that, but maybe worse.
Wow. Okay.
It's all time.
It's more than a cult following for Coach Speak. You'll catch that on Thursday. It's a Seminole Headlines production featuring Ira, Corey, and Jeff. And I now know that there will be a Shane Beamer clip.
There certainly will.
Edition. So I hope you're keeping notes. Hey, Ingram Smith from the Battle's End checking in. He ran into Russ at the game yesterday. There you go. Thank you, Ingram. And thanks for checking in, Mr. Battle's End.
Awesome.
See, the whole Nole family, everybody gets together on this stuff. Right. And if you want to support players, go to thebattlesend.com. There's a glossy that the players will sign for you from the fumble return at Clemson. So that's a good way to support the program and get something to put on your wall too, which is cool.
And my friends at Registered Sausage said that they were out there. They had Registered Sausage at the Battle's End tailgate as well. So you can go get some of that when you go out there.
Very nice. I see our guest is here a little bit ahead of time. We're going to answer a couple of questions from the chat first, and then we're going to pivot to our Warchant football analyst, Dominic Robinson. So hang on for just a moment back there, Mr. Analyst. All right, Director Ben, what do you got for us? What have you starred? What do the people want to know about the team? All right, Gator Kirk says, what do you think about being 13.5-point favorites against the Blue Devils? And Gator, I saw it open at 15.5 in the 4 o'clock hour. So I think we discussed it a little bit, Ira, but that means that Vegas thinks that it's going to be a backup quarterback for Duke at this time, right?
It definitely seems like it. And I think it's also a tip of the cap to Florida State. I mean, Florida State is playing well. And I think that was a pretty complete game yesterday. They're healthier now. So a lot of the question marks about who's going to be available and kind of, are they juggling the lineup? It seems like this team is kind of getting closer to full strength. Johnny Wilson didn't play Saturday, but it doesn't seem like he's going to be out too long. And so I think it's both things. I think it's a nod to Florida State, the way they're playing, but also, yeah, you would think if Riley Leonard was definitely playing, or they thought there was a strong chance he's playing, I'm going to guess that line might be maybe half of what it is.
How about the impact, Ira, of Micah Pittman and Johnny Wilson? I know Micah's not here anymore, but Ron Dugan's credits Micah Pittman with the attention to detail for blocking on the perimeter. And he said his message to Johnny was, if this little guy can do it, think about what you can do at your size. Mm-hmm. And even though Johnny Wilson wasn't a part of the proceedings yesterday on the field, Destin Hill had a couple of really good blocks. Ja'Kai Douglas did. Kentron did. I mean, and Keon's come on a long way in a short period of time in that department. That was impressive to see from those receivers on the perimeter.
Yeah, and that'd be a great topic for D-Rob to touch on too when he comes on in, because, obviously he played that position. But, I think, and I've asked Mike Norvell about it a few times, because even when they bring in freshmen like Hakeem Williams, I mean, he has just jumped right in. And I said, is that something that you saw out of him, any willingness to do that in high school? Because again, man, when you're a 5-star receiver in high school, I can't imagine they ever asked him to block anybody. How would you know he could? And he just said, man, that's just the culture of that room now, that all of those guys know that that's expected, and they know they're not going to get on the field if they don't do it. So it's definitely something they embrace. And you're right. I think that did change to a good degree when Micah came in last year.
That was my favorite moment yesterday. They caught it on television, Ira, after Hakeem's touchdown. And you think about all that he's had to do to get himself ready to play. He was out of shape in spring. The coaches say that on the record, which I find funny. And Ron Dugan's challenged Hakeem through the media. As a freshman, he needs to do X, Y, and Z. And then they trusted him with snaps at Clemson. He had more than a handful of snaps at Clemson, which is a big sign for a true freshman. He scores that touchdown, and there is a long embrace and sharing of words between Ron Dugan's and Hakeem. That was a really, really cool moment, and it tells you that development's taking place at that position. That's a good sign where Hakeem is going moving forward.
Somebody in the chat just said that Armella killed a man on that screen pass that Hakeem scored on. He did. I mean, that was perfectly blocked. I mean, Armella really got out there quickly, got on his guy, and I think the other Jackson West, I think, had the other block. It was very well designed, well blocked. And Hakeem, man, I don't know if I realized he had that gear.
I didn't. That was, wow, that was something else. And that's what, second half should be for Florida State, Ira, when you see freshmen or true freshmen making plays and you think about the future for a moment, and you say, wow, it's really, really bright. All right, let's take one more question from the general team side before we get to our X's and O's expert. Sergeant Eggy, what are your all's thoughts on Jared Verse? I know just having him out there makes an impact, but his numbers aren't great. Will that hurt his draft stock? Well, there's a couple of questions there, Ira. What do you think first about overall his performance this season?
I think he's played really well. I just think that they haven't played a lot of traditional offenses where I think he's going to get, like Boston College, Thomas Castellanos. They were so concerned about his running ability that they weren't going to really pin their ears back and rush the passer. They've played a lot of mobile quarterbacks. I think he's done it. I think he's played really well. I don't think his numbers are going to bother anybody at the draft. I mean, the thing is, they're going to so much more to me, and D-Rob can talk about this because he trains athletes for a living. But to me, so much more of the draft is about, physical abilities, the testing, much more so than your production based on whatever system you're in. So I don't think that's going to affect him. Yeah. And excuse me. Now, one thing I would say though is I don't think he's going to test on that topic. One thing I thought about Jared Verse last year, and I thought this year, just being blunt, I don't think he's going to test in terms of like the measurables quite the way people might expect. He's not as long as Jermaine Johnson. And so that is going to affect him a little bit. He's not quite that frame. So I think that might hurt him a little bit once he gets there. But I don't think production is going to have a big factor. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, the explosiveness is there, and if you look
Yeah.
at the game plans against him are to keep away from him or to spend two players, be it a chipping tight end or maybe even sometimes an outright double team if they can get out there on Jared. But if you look at what they did yesterday, they rolled the pocket a bunch. They just rolled away from him. So I'm not too worried about it. That is having an impact on the game without having the numbers per se. But he's allowed to make plays too in big moments, and we forget, Ira, he had a couple of big moments like in the LSU game. There's a strip sack, but it's ruled an incomplete pass. And he had his moments against Clemson too. So it's not like he hasn't done anything. It's just that when you are the best player on the defensive line, people are going to stay away from you. It's like people would complain about Xavier Rhodes his last year at Florida State. Like, well, what about the interception count?
Yeah.
Well, if nobody's throwing to him, that's a sign enough. Let's welcome in our analyst. It's Dominic Robinson. His feature video is on the channel right now on Warchant TV, talking about Florida State's running game. Another good day for the ground game against Syracuse this weekend, nearly 200 yards. What's up, Dominic? Welcome. How are you doing?
What's up, fellas? Happy Sunday, and happy to be 6-0.
Yeah,
I feel like, man, when I saw the video last week, I heard Peaches and Herb reunited in my head. I was just glad to have you back, buddy.
Yeah, man, it was so good to be back and get back down to the nitty gritty with my guy, man.
Good time.
It was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to bringing you guys some more good content on breaking down these guys and looking at what they've been doing, and obviously doing so many things really well. It's been a fun team to watch.
Can you touch on that Jared Verse thing, like just talking about production versus in terms of draft evaluations and that type of thing?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of his measurables not quite jumping off the screen the way that I think a lot of people are thinking or hoping or expecting. I talk a lot about, I have over the last couple of years, is like during bowl season, it's incredible how many guys are first rounders. Like how are 117 guys first rounders?
Do you remember? And I love Brett Williams. But remember, Kuiper had him in the first round on his big board in November, December. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. You watch the last couple games, like our Florida game, and then the bowl games, and then obviously now the playoffs. And I've always wanted to just chart how many guys are mentioned as first rounders. It's crazy. You watch like Marshall versus Troy, and it's like 3 first rounders. It's like, okay, I understand these guys are good players, and I think people need to understand that there's nothing wrong with getting drafted in the second round, the third round, the fourth round, the fifth round. Look at Brock Purdy, the very last pick of the draft. You get drafted, you're a special human being. You play football in college, you're special. So Jared Verse is going to go high. I don't know that, you hear it's always first round because that's the easy thing to throw out when you're commentating a game. But yeah, his production, I wouldn't worry about his production. I would worry about all these guys. They have a splash in, at the combine and pro day. Almost every first rounder either has some sort of ridiculous amount of production or they run some ridiculous time. You got to have one or the other. Guys like Jared Verse usually get sort of thrown in that mix around second round because they don't have either. It's not a 17 sack season and he's not going to run a 4.49,
Right.
And those guys usually end up sliding more than they should. Honestly, I've never understood. I hate, as a guy who trains athletes for a living, and I love the training side of it, but I hate the combine side of it because we get lost in these guys. Some of these guys have 90, or I should say 90, but 40, 50 games of tape of playing football. Right. And then they somehow lose millions of dollars because they don't run around in shorts and tights and a t-shirt really well. Right. In a one-time shot on a random Saturday, in the spring. It's like, dude, we just watched this guy for 3 falls. How much do I need to see him run around in shorts to know he's a good player or not? So I get really frustrated with the whole combine stuff and how guys slide and even how some guys jump up. Sometimes I get really upset with some of these wideouts that run a 4.2. They literally have never ran a route and now all of a sudden they're getting talked about as first rounders.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is like Anthony Richardson. I don't feel like his college tape told you he should be what he was is a draft pick. Now we'll see. I mean, he's had health issues, but
Phenomenal example. I was really like perplexed when I was hearing and seeing all that, and we'll see how that ends up turning out. But yeah, I feel very good about Jared Versus. Obviously, being a first round talent is not the same as being a first rounder. He's clearly a first round talent. I just don't think, again, like I was saying before, only 32 guys can go.
Right.
Yeah.
Only 32 guys can actually get picked, contrary to when you watch games in December, what everybody's saying. Everybody seems to be a first rounder.
So we've got the opportunity for you in the chat right now, Warchant TV, to ask questions to Dominic Robinson. Nearly 800 of you here. Hit that like button underneath the video. This is going to be a fun final 20 minutes or so on the show. Before we get to your questions, Dominic, just a broad view of what you've seen so far. Florida State's halfway through the season, won all their games. We talked about the running game specifically in a video this week on the channel.
Mm-hmm.
But what are your takeaways from what you're seeing either side of the ball? Pick your poison.
Yeah, well, I do want to talk about the running game just because that's the breakdown we went. You guys go check out that breakdown from this week. Tom and I killed it. Tom doing his thing, asking the great questions, throwing fastballs at me and letting me put them in play. I do also want to say, go back. I hope it's still there. Last year, I did in 2022 a breakdown on counter, which is Mike Norvell's favorite play. Favorite run play, I should say, or favorite run concept. And we dug deep in the weeds on that. I think that was a good 20-minute, breakdown. You guys go find that. Hopefully it's still up on the YouTube. The one thing that Florida State did was they bludgeoned people with counter in 2022. There were times where literally the whole stadium knew it. The moms knew it, the dads knew it, the cousins knew it, the uncles knew it. Just everybody knew counter was coming. Norvell dialed up counter, and it was a 5-yard gain. This year, he's not doing that. It's clear, and I noticed it yesterday. Saturday was yesterday. I noticed it yesterday. So the guys had between Trey and Toafili, they had 21 carries. And 13 of them were a zone run. 11 of those were to Trey. So Trey had 14 carries. 11 of them were on zone runs, not counter. He's not running counter with Trey Benson this year. He's clearly going away from it for some reason. Obviously, we're not in those meetings in those locker rooms, but it's there's a concerted effort to go away from that with Trey. So I will say yesterday was an interesting, study for me because I put out the run game deal and it seemed like there was still leaky. It was still leaky. And then he goes away from counter. He goes zone with Trey. Trey starts to, Trey's a very good zone runner. Mainly because he falls forward on everything. He's got great vision and he falls forward on everything. So you can't make a bad call. Even if you are leaky in zone, he falls forward. It's a 3-yard gain. Well, we're still in a good position. We're 2nd and 7, and that's the one thing about Trey Benson that makes him so special is he's got speed, but he also falls forward.
Do you think, is it possible that, earlier this year, I think it was Clemson where they were coming backside and making plays on the counter. Like they were blowing up the plays, I thought sometimes maybe from the backside. And that was a game where they put Jaheim Bell in the backfield to help out.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing with that is Jordan, I think, is more hurt than we ever know. And this is probably his whole career. We probably never know half of Jordan's injuries. The dude is just a warrior. Like an absolute warrior. So what I'm seeing is the answer to that is quarterback run game.
Right.
If they're making plays on the backside, if they're coming down, if for some reason they're making those plays, you keep them honest by going quarterback run game.
Right.
Or you go, you fake counter and then you pass off of it. which they do plenty of. They usually start the game with it, and they do plenty of it. But the problem with it is most of our concepts, or most of their concepts off of it, are deep passing game concepts when they fake counter. So it's more of what like a run action pass is what I would call it, or play action pass. So so what I look to see is, as we get into some of these tougher matchups, do they then sort of take the restrictor plates off of Jordan and say, hey, we got to win this game, and they run counter RPO where him running the ball is an option, because that's one of the things that's clearly a difference between parts of last year and then 2 years ago that's gone away, is him being a vital part in the run game. Part of it too is we have better blockers up front, and we have better runners of the ball now 2 years later. And so I think they're trying to do less with him in the run game. But yeah, that's the big thing that I see is like, that they got to go to some sort of quarterback run game, or they got to let him cut. They got to cut him loose first one-on-one coverage and let him throw it more. If those guys are running that thing down, counter down from the backside.
Larry in the chat says, thank you for that clutch catch in the swamp. So he just wants you to know, D-Rob, that he appreciates you, and he appreciates that moment in Florida State history. So thank you.
I appreciate you, Larry.
Jeremy wants to know, why do you think Florida State wasn't throwing as many intermediate routes until yesterday? Do you see anything about that deep ball?
I do. I see a problem that this is what I'm gonna look at for this week's breakdown. So you guys be on the lookout for the breakdown this week, either Tuesday or Wednesday. It'll be out up on the YouTube. And I'm going to look at something that I think I'm seeing is Jordan in this game. He was 10 for 10 behind the line. So screens, check downs, anything 0 or less. He was 3 for 5, 20 yards down the field. So between those two, he's 13 for 15, and he's got 3 deep balls, and then he's completing everything, behind the line of scrimmage. Between 1 and 19 yards, he's 10 for 21. So he's less than 50% on balls that you should be somewhere between 55 and 65%. If we're talking quick game, I'm expecting to be 70% quick game. So that's 0 to 10 yards. Usually that's your slants, your hitches, your flats, things like that. So I'm seeing that this may be an issue that Jordan is either having with pressure on the intermediate routes, where the passes that are over 20 yards, they're going max protection, so they have a little bit more time, or he just has an issue with accuracy between those in those intermediate routes. And Mike Norvell knows this, but it's not that he's not calling it. I mean, like I said, there's 21 out of his 30. What did I say? His 31 passes or something.
Yeah.
34 passes that he threw. 21 of them were somewhere between 1 and 19 yards. So the routes are being run, the plays are being called, and he's missing. And the reason for him missing, that's what I'm going to dig into this week.
Now this week in particular is not, they had a bunch of drop passes too, which
there were 3 drops that were probably in that range. Right. So his passing percentage was somewhere in 60%. He would have been 72% had he have had those passes not been dropped.
Other thing
so that we're definitely, I definitely dig into that also is, what's happening on the other end of it. Are the DBs making plays? Or is he just flat out missing? Again, is there pressure? Is he, does he have 2 guys on his back while he's releasing the ball? All of that stuff.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing it. I bet the pressure is probably a part of it. And then the other thing is, it seems like to me, and this is just man, like not studying the film or going back and not obviously analyzing it the way you're going to, but to me, like everybody thinks they're throwing the ball downfield a ton this year, and they're really not, like statistically compared to last year. But I think the perception is that way because it feels like when they are throwing it downfield more, a lot of times they're contested passes, they're not wide open. Like it seemed to me like in the last couple of years, because they ran the ball so well, when they did take shots down the field, a lot of times the receivers were behind the secondary. And so I think it felt like they got completed more often. It felt like they weren't risky passes. And I think now, because Keon is so good, because Johnny's so good, I think Jordan is throwing up more 50-50-ish balls than maybe they did in the past. And I think so it feels like he's forcing it downfield. But how much of that is when you've got really good receivers, sometimes you've got to give them those chances. Like, is that part of it?
Absolutely. So there's an element to what I'm watching is like the evolution of Jordan Travis that's also coinciding with the evolution of Mike Norvell. Like these things are happening at the same time. And so what I'm seeing is that early on, it was we got to let Jordan win the game with his legs, and we got to protect the football. We weren't very strong on defense, 2 years ago. And so it's like we got to possess the football and we got to protect Jordan, because if Jordan goes down, we definitely aren't winning the game. And so and we got to run the ball with him like 14 times. So I can't also expose him in the passing game and in the run game. Well, what I'm seeing is as they're evolving, I would say last year, the deep balls were all off of really elaborate play action fakes that had max protection, 6 to 7 guys protecting. And it was, I don't want to say feast or famine, but it really was like a single shot post to one guy. And if that wasn't there, then it usually was tuck and run. Where now, because the offense has evolved so much and the players have gotten so much better, you have Johnny, who's now just a refined player, and then Keon comes over. Now you can push the ball down the field without so many bells and whistles, and it doesn't just have to be fake. So that's the other thing that I want to look at this week is how often are they completing drop back passes versus play action passes? Right. And so what you're talking about, what I think we're seeing as fans is they're taking more shots in the drop back game that they never took. I would say last year it maybe was one every other game where it was like drop back pass, deep ball. And it maybe wasn't even that, to be honest with you. It probably wasn't even that. Where now we're seeing about 1 or 2.5 of, hey, I'm going to just throw a 9 ball, which is a go route, to Keon. And that's worth it. That's good offense because Keon is better than most of the guys he's matched up against. Probably all of them. So it's worth it for me to I had an offensive coordinator tell me one time, matter of fact, it may have been Lincoln Riley like 3 or 4 years ago, that if I have a dominant X receiver, I have to throw him a 9 route once a quarter. I owe it to my team to do that. And if that guy doesn't win, then we weren't going to win the game anyway, because that's our best player. He's our guy. He's the guy that makes this, stirs the shake. So, so that's what you have to do. And so that's probably what you're seeing. And those are lower percentage plays. But they're also splash plays that they change games. Those are game-changing moments, and we saw one, yesterday. Yeah.
And to Ira's point, it's not that much more on the deep balls. Before yesterday's game, and we'll see what the numbers shake out to be, but it was only a 3% increase in shots 20-plus yards down the field. It's just that the accuracy had dropped from 45% to 30%. And so that's maybe what happens in the middle there. That's what Dominic is going to explain for us, and can't wait to see that breakdown the middle of this week on Warchant TV. So I want to get this question in before we're done from Brett. Dominic, running game thoughts after Syracuse. Now, you broke down the running game a little bit this week on the channel, but do you think that can the O-line move the line of scrimmage on a 3rd and 2 or a 4th and 1 based upon what you're seeing? No bells, no whistles, straight up, can they win in a situation like that? What do you think?
I don't feel like Coach Norvell feels confident that they can. Right. That's from what I'm seeing, just based on the sequencing of play calls, even that stalling of the red zone that we had yesterday.
And
again, the changing from counter, which is bread and butter, to trying other things, trying pin and pull, running way more zone than you've ever run. That tells me like, hey, we're searching for something to hang our hat on when we do get to the nitty gritty, when I get to the playoff, when I get to the ACC championship. That tells me that he's searching a little bit. So, so no, I don't feel like we're there. Can they get there? They can get there. But I would say right now, the answer is no, it's not there. And they're going to have to, either find it or find another way to be creative, to find a way to get that, because that's how games are won, right there.
Can I follow up on that real quick, Tom? So D-Rob, we had this conversation last year. Remember when people were ripping Norvell for being too cute around the goal line, and we were like, look, man, they can't just move people. But isn't that how many? Because you watch more college football than we do. Like, we watch Florida State. You're watching teams across the country. Yeah. So how many offensive lines can do that? Like, how many offensive lines out there going up against a similarly sized school conference opponent can move the line in obvious running situations? What percentage?
Honestly, it's not much. What you're seeing now is definitely a shift in college football, which is that used to be you can't win 6-7 games unless you can do that. And then we started to get very creative on the offensive side, and guys started to figure out a way to win games without having anyone block, where the perimeter screen game, to the wideouts became the running game. And, Mike Leach and some of these guys, like, recently are starting to figure out, like, okay, I can get really creative with jet sweep and, fly motion, jet motion, all this other stuff, where I can dress up my run game. And now I don't have to be as good with the front five, because the defensive players are thinking and not just playing. And so yeah, it's not this super indictment like it used to be in football. 20 years ago in football, if you said that to a offensive coach, it was like literally saying the worst thing you could about his mom. Like, you tell me that my offensive line can't move somebody, that's the most disrespectful thing you could say. And now guys are like, oh yeah, they can't, but watch this, 500 yards of offense on you. So who cares if they can move guys? Because I can move guys, So that's the way that the game has changed, evolved really, recently over the last probably 10, 15 years, is that guys are now finding ways like, hey, if my guys can't block, now it becomes a lot more difficult. It's low percentage, all of that. So again, if you can do that, though, that will always win. Football is the same game that it's always been. If you can move guys off the line of scrimmage, you will win. That's why you still want to try and develop that. And that's why Coach Norvell is still sticking to that run game, because if you can do that, then that's how you win games in December and January.
So we'll take one more from Ralph, Spartan Noles 71 for D-Rob. This is a broad one, Dominic, and he's asking you, if you're a head coach, what changes do you make to what you see? So put it another way, what would you like to see more of now that you're watching Florida State, granularly?
Nothing. What they're doing right now is phenomenal. On all aspects. I mean, heck, throwing Keon back there to return punts this week. I mean, right now it feels like I wish I could be in some of those coaches' meetings like this year, because I feel like that staff is showing up and they've got to be so happy to look at the pieces that they now have in relation to what they had when they first got there. I mean, they just have to be like kids in a candy store. They got to be so fired up because he's just like, there's so many things that they can do now that they couldn't do. Like, they couldn't even imagine to do. And so I would not change anything that they're doing. I would say if you wanted to nitpick, they're probably playing a little bit more man than you are going to be able to play. Say if you get into a playoff scenario, you cannot play man for 50 snaps. You don't have the depth to do that, and you don't have the horses to do that. And nobody does. Like that's that's the early 2000s Miami stuff where they would just play man for a whole game. And so that's a really difficult thing. But I'm not changing anything. If I'm this staff, I'm looking to make sure we tighten the bolts and the screws on special teams, which again, I love the Keon addition as a punt returner. I don't want him back there every single time, but I do like, when I was there, we literally, Leon, Washington and I, we rotated. We went back and forth. I would go one, he would go one. I would go one, he would go one. Then Lorenzo Booker came in, and then he would throw him back there every once in a while. He would kind of go every three rotations, because it's hard, man. That's a tough job, and if you're going to be full time on offense, and that's going to be tough. But I would tighten the screws on special teams and some of those things, and then like I said, just if I was really being nitpicky in terms of like looking at ACC championship playoff game 1, playoff game 2, I would probably want to see a little bit more zone, just for like self-preservation. Because like I said, the percentage of man is pretty high for when you're going to get some horses like you'll play down the road.
Can I just say two things real quick, Tom?
Yep.
One is there'll be a good topic for a video at some point, Tom, especially as we get closer to the playoff or to the postseason, because it would be good for you to go look back at when they played zone and why maybe it hasn't been super successful, and like some of the keys to that. Because I think a lot of times as media or fans, we're like, just play more zone. Whether like why
there's a reason.
What are the challenges? And then the last thing I wanted to say is Corey came in the press box on Saturday, and we started talking about something. He brought up the video you did. He's like, man, I hope 34 from Virginia Tech's parents weren't watching that video. he thought you went coach 30 on him. Man, I'm not talented. I'm peeing down my leg.
Absolutely. Man, I'll tell you one thing about me, like, and I hope you guys will get this from me as we spend more time together. We had all year last year, and hopefully, 50 more years together. It's not personal. Anything that I say, I'm just a coach that loves ball. And if that kid was one of my kids, I would say the same thing to him.
34 is just not going to compete.
And then I would love it up. Yeah, and then I would love him up, But I'm not saying anything that I wouldn't say, and it's all just in the hopes of helping someone get better. So. Yeah. 34 needs to get to work because he's not ACC ready.
Thomas Watson in the chat said, "I'm not really an athlete." I'm not. Yeah. Oh, man.
We had a good laugh at his expense, but then also Dimitri too, because he got blown up on the counter.
Yeah. That was good. That was good, man. Yeah. That was good, man. And that's going to happen, man. Like, I hope, again, why I say, like, none of that's personal. If you play football the right way, you're going to get got. That is it. The guys that don't get it, it's because they don't ever stick their nose in it. Right. And if you don't stick your nose in it, then you're a liability to us as a team. So, hey, you're going to get got, man. You play Division I football. You play football at any level. Right. You stick your nose in there like you're supposed to. Every once in a while, you're going to get got, man. That's the way it's supposed to go.
All right.
Hey, I do want to touch on the wideouts blocking, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Go for it.
I have to. And if this is Micah Pittman, again, I'm not in those rooms, so I don't know if this is Micah Pittman, whether this is Johnny coming over from ASU. I don't know I don't remember him doing this at ASU. Blocking is not a talent deal. It's not a 5-star, 4-star. Nobody gets recruited for blocking. Contrary to belief, no coach is on the trail looking for a blocker.
Right.
But what you are looking for is a mentality and a personality of a person that loves his teammates enough that they'll do whatever they can to help us win this football game. And if that means I got to block for 60 plays and lay my life on the line, then that's what I'm going to do. And that is an innate personality, internal motivation type thing. That's not even really going to come from a coach that's saying, hey, move your feet right here and your hands right here and move it. You either want to do it or you don't want to do it. You either really love your teammates or you don't love your teammates the way that you claim you do. And these guys, man, like I said, you said earlier, Ira, I watch everybody. I'm watching games. I'm at games. These guys get after it on a whole nother level, man. They really do. I mean, huge hat tip to Ron Dugans. And Norvell, and again, Micah Pittman and Johnny, and whoever it is who set that sort of personality, because it's certainly lasting. And that's a thing that will last for a long time. We'll be talking about it 8 years from now going, it becomes who you are. It becomes part of the fabric of who you are and what you do. I mean, if you look at like 10 years of FSU wideouts, they looked like a certain way. Go back to like Kes McCorvey to, if you go down the line, it's like, oh, these guys were essentially clones of themselves. Well, there's a reason. They're not actually the same person. It's because they saw a certain style of play, and then when they got there, they wanted to emulate that. So these young guys, when they're getting there, they're seeing the Micahs and the Johnnies and, the way that these guys get after in the blocking game. And they're imitating it like off the bat. It's really fun as a wideout coach and, a guy who loves really good wideout play. There's so much of it with Florida State that it's very, very refreshing, and it's very unique. Just say that it's very unique. I'm sure there's other teams across the country that are doing it, but not at the level that Florida State's doing on the perimeter. They really, really are high effort, high energy, get after it.
Because if you don't really want to do it, you can make it look like you're trying to, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. We are brilliant at pretending to block. We are. I mean, there's wide. I mean, and that's all the NFL is. There's nobody in the NFL trying to block anybody. It's all just pretend. And the other thing is DBs, they want to be blocked.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to tackle. They didn't get a scholarship to go to wherever to tackle. So all you have to do is just want to do it. They're going to concede. Right. They want to be blocked. They don't want to. You think I want Trey Benson?
Yeah.
I don't want to see Trey Benson running full speed. I don't get to him until he's 12 yards down the field. You think I want to hit this guy?
I'm going to hold this block. I'm going to hold this block and wait for the safety and the linebacker to come over.
If you show any effort, I'm going to stay blocked as a defensive back. You just have to show the effort to block me so that I don't get cussed in film. So I'm going to show a little bit of that other fake effort to look like, but Jay, you made a good block, man. What can we say? Those guys don't want to. Those guys want to be blocked. So all we have to do as wideouts is just care enough about our teammates to show some effort. And Florida State's wideouts are doing all of that. It's fun.
Give them what they want. Give them what they want.
That's it. Give them what they want. They want to be blocked. Just go block them, man. Just show me a little bit of effort and just go block them.
Z-Chan contributed to the program, and he says, this is for you, D-Rob. This is for you. So a contribution from the chat. This is Z-Chan. And
shout out Z-Chan. I've missed you, man. I'm glad to see you, and glad to be back with you, man.
All right. Last one. I'm going to abuse it a little more of your time if you're okay to answer one more fun question, D-Rob.
I'm good, man. Yeah. Let's go.
All right. We talked about
a great time.
The meeting rooms for the Meach play. You said, this is where your team would say, what happened to you, man? Like what? So if you can give me either at Florida State or wherever you've been on your journey, maybe your the funniest moment that you can repeat in a meeting room.
Oh,
that you
man.
Yeah.
Gee. Oh, the list just goes on and on. I don't know if this one is funny, but when you started to say that, I thought about, you're just talking about moments, embarrassing moments. So there was a week where I had been just off the charts. I was just catching everything, just one hand catch, blah, blah, blah. And I think Gene comes up to me and we do an interview or whatever. And I make a comment, the best hands on the team. I said something about having the best hands on the team. Yeah, just total throwaway line. Didn't even think anything of it, whatever. Well, he prints it or something. It gets out there, gets in around the locker room. Of course, there's a bunch of guys in the locker room that catch balls for a living too. And they're like, wait a minute. I mean, it's like Anquan's on the team and Talmud Gardner and all these guys, right? These guys can catch. Like they're all gonna be NFL. Atrus Bell and
I know my guy Robert Morgan didn't say anything about
it. No, Rob G has never said anything. So they're giving me hell. Oh yeah. So now I can't drop anything. Like I can't drop the Gatorade Powerade being tossed to me in the meeting room without somebody saying, "Oh, best hands on the team, huh?" Like I can't drop nothing. So we go to Maryland that week. I'm the punt returner. And we're up like 40-0. And they had an All-American punter. This dude could punt. I can't remember his name, but this dude, I mean, his ball was, I swear, was literally scraping a cloud and then coming down. We're ahead 40, and we got a shutout. And you know how much a shutout means, especially to Mickey Andrews and that staff. Shutouts are everything. And one of his punts gets up there, turns over, and it goes right through my hands, and I drop it. And the defense absolutely dog cussed me because 4 plays later, Maryland scores. It's their only touchdown of the day. And, I'll never forget that because it's probably the last time that I ever said anything positive about myself. And the defensive players, they were upset with me for a while, probably for the rest of that year. They gave me hell, man. So that was one of those embarrassing moments. So those, when you get to it, especially and you finally get over it, Saturday night, maybe you get back on the flight, you're a little upset about it. We won by 40. It's still good, but then you got to relive it in film. And then you're like, oh shoot, here it comes. And it's like the first punt you catch, you make a guy miss or whatever, you get a 12-yard run. But all you're thinking about, you're seeing all this good stuff, but all you're thinking about is eventually they're going to get to the drop. That's all I'm thinking. Eventually they're going to get to the drop. Sure enough, fourth quarter comes, I drop it, and that was one of the more embarrassing moments. I'll have to think of a funny one for next week.
In your defense, real quick, because if somebody's watching this, they may not understand why you would have said something like that. I'm going to guess that the way it probably went is Gene probably said something like, do you feel like you got the best hands on the team? Or it looks like you've got the best hands on the team, all those guys. And then you probably said, yeah, I think I do, or whatever. I don't think it came out of just like randomly, hey, I want to proclaim to the world I've got the best. Not that you didn't lack confidence. You didn't lack confidence back then. But that's usually how players get into situations sometimes, is when they're
absolutely, and that is absolutely how the article read, right, or whatever it was. It read like as if I was making a declarative statement, like I have the best hands on the team. Come watch me catch punts against Maryland this week. I'll be putting on a catching clinic. And then I dropped a freaking punt. Oh, that one hurt. That one still hurts. Like every time I catch a punt, I see that punt. So yeah, that was an embarrassing. That was an embarrassing moment, man. I'll never forget that one. And defense. Shout out to the defense. I think that was 0-2. Shout out to the 0-2 defense, man. I'm sorry for giving you guys a shutout out.
With our numbers, at least one member of that defense is watching now, and I think they got the closure they were looking for. D-Rob, like, all right. We understand. We appreciate.
They're going to take down the D-Rob dartboard that they've been throwing darts at for the last 20 years.
It'll be like Steve Buscemi and Billy Madison. They'll cross your name out. They're like, all right. With the lip.
Right. He's good now. We don't have to go find him in Arizona. He's good now. Leave him alone.
D-Rob, thank you so much for the time tonight. I can't wait to meet up on Tuesday to record this piece on Jordan Travis. It should be a lot of fun.
Yes, sir. See you
Thanks,
guys.
D-Rob.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
For Ira, for D-Rob, for Director Ben behind the scenes, this has been Sunday Smash presented by Russ Vorhis, russvorhis.com. Stay tuned to warchant.com for the latest. There's a YouTube special. It's $1 for 2 months, people. It's $1 for 2 months. You go to warchant.com, you sign up, use promo code FSU and the number 1 to get 2 months of access to warchant.com for just $1. So again, Wake Up Warchant will be on your pod feeds tomorrow morning. All the coverage from the press conferences. It's game week. Florida State prime time against Duke next week, 7:30. We will get you set. For Ira, D-Rob, Ben, and thank you to everybody that contributed to the program, like Gordon and Z-Chan. Good night, and we will talk to you next time on Warchant TV.